That morning, the ocean was perfect. Warm water, a light breeze, and I was completely alone on the horizon, just gliding over the waves and not thinking about anything. I didn't even have time to understand what was happening when a huge black and white body burst out of the water right in front of me, and it felt like time had stopped. The orca was the size of a small truck, and it was rushing straight at me with its mouth open, cutting through the water like a torpedo. I tried to get away from it on a wave. I stood up on the board, caught the crest, and sped off, thinking that speed would save me. But the orca didn't fall behind. I could see its shadow under the water, huge and fast, and it was clearly moving faster than me. I changed direction, tried to catch another wave, moved to the side, but the sea predator kept appearing right next to me every time, as if it was playing with me. Only this was not a game I wanted to be part of. Its fins stuck out of the water just a few yards away, black and straight like a huge knife. And with every second it was getting closer, suddenly it hit the board from the side, precise and intentional, and I instantly lost my balance and fell into the water. I flipped underwater, lost my sense of direction for a moment, and when I came back up, the orca was right in front of me, its mouth opened so wide I could see every tooth. I closed my eyes and prepared for the worst because there was no time and no space left to escape. But the impact never came. Instead, I felt something push me softly but firmly on the shoulder, to the left, then left again, and again. I opened my eyes and saw that it was looking straight at me, not like a predator looking at prey, but differently, and I couldn't find the word for that look at first, but then I understood. It was looking at me with desperation. I don't know what made me decide, but I lay down on the board and started paddling in the direction it was pushing me. There were no helpful waves, only open water and a huge sea predator ahead. It didn't swim fast, and from time to time it looked back, almost like a dog checking if its owner was following, and every time I slowed down, it also stopped and waited. I suddenly realized what I was doing. I was swimming in the open ocean following an orca that, just a minute ago, I thought wanted to eat me. And I couldn't decide whether it was courage or stupidity. About 20 minutes later, the shore appeared ahead, rocky with a concrete fence going straight into the water and signs that I couldn't clearly read from a distance. But the meaning was obvious. Private property, no entry. The orca stopped right near the fence and began to circle. Again and again, not leaving, clearly unable to go any further. It was making short, sharp sounds, not like what I had heard before in the open ocean, something more tense, almost like an alarm signal. I pulled my surfboard onto the rocks and carefully moved along the fence on foot until I found a place where I could look inside. Behind the fence, there was a small closed bay, surrounded on all sides with a wooden pier and buildings on the shore, and right by the pier, something dark was moving in the water. At first, I thought it was a buoy or a boat, but then it surfaced, and I saw a young orca, clearly not an adult, with the typical white patch behind its eye. There was a cut on its fin, not deep, but noticeable, clearly injured by a net when it was caught, and it stayed close to the pier, as if it didn't understand where to swim or what to do next. On the shore stood two strong-looking guards, and a little farther away, a truck with a logo that I immediately recognized. One of those marine parks where orcas are made to swim in circles to music for entertainment, and where they live in pools the size of a bathtub. I had seen reports about places like that, and nothing good happens there. Animals don't live there. They slowly fade away. At the far end of the pier, I noticed old nets with traces of blood, several deep scratches on the concrete from fins, and large bones, clearly not from fish. It looked like not all orcas here lived long enough to be sent to marine parks. While I was watching through a gap in the fence, a man came out from the main house, wearing an expensive linen suit, with a phone to his ear, walking like someone who was used to everything being decided in his favor. I recognized him immediately. Ramon Castro, a local businessman, owner of half the piers in the area. A man people in our town tried to avoid, not out of fear, but from experience. With people like him, you never get justice, only trouble. He walked across his property without looking around, like a man who had never in his life been told no. I hid behind the rocks when one of the guards walked just a couple of steps from the fence and didn't even look in my direction. He simply passed by, and I didn't breathe until he disappeared around the corner. Then I took out my phone and started recording, slowly, trying not to make any noise, capturing the truck, the pier, the young Orca by the dock, and Castro himself in the background. I filmed everything as evidence. These people would now have to answer before the law for what they were doing to those helpless animals. Later that afternoon, I heard Castro's voice coming from an open window, loud, businesslike, with no intention of hiding. He spoke on the phone briefly and to the point. A young, healthy Orca, shipping it the day after tomorrow, same price. Then he laughed and added, "Everything is clean, no problems." A living creature, treated like a shipment of goods. I listened and thought only one thing. This arrogant man would regret it. The day after tomorrow, I called the Coast Guard and explained everything I had seen. A closed private bay, a young Orca with a wound on its fin, a truck from a well-known marine park, old nets covered in blood and bones at the far end of the pier. The officer listened patiently, asked a few questions, and then said what I was afraid to hear. In our country, capturing orcas for commercial purposes is not against the law, which means the police cannot do anything. It was a legal business. I put the phone away and stared at the water for a long time. There was no official way, and the police were powerless here. Then I called my friend Dan, a journalist who wrote about many topics, including environmental issues, and I knew that if anyone could help in this situation, it was him. I spoke quickly about how the Orca chased me and knocked me off the board, about the push on my shoulder, about the calf with the cut fin, about the truck with the logo, and about what that scoundrel Castro said, that the young Orca would be taken away the day after tomorrow, and about the Coast Guard who refused to help, saying that everything was completely legal. Dan listened, paused for a second, and swore. It was the best response I could have hoped for. "Do you have video?" he asked. I said yes. "I'll be there in 2 hours. I'll bring Mark." Mark knew Castro even better than I did and openly hated him. When I said the name, he simply said, "I'm coming." A long night was ahead of us. We arrived around midnight. Me, Dan, and Mark, a pickup truck with boards in the back and several full canisters of water that we had filled on the way. During the day, 2 guards were on duty at Castro's house, but the overconfident owner clearly did not expect visitors at night. Only 1 guard remained on the night shift, and as we watched from the darkness, the silhouette in his booth froze and didn't move anymore. It looked like he had fallen asleep. We waited about 20 more minutes until we were sure nothing would wake him, and only then we looked at each other and nodded. Dan was the first to slip to the gate and quietly open it. Then he came back and blocked the door of the guard booth with a heavy wooden box he found right there by the fence. Carefully, without extra noise, Mark let out a quiet grunt, and I gestured for him to stay silent. Then Dan crept to Castro's cars in the guard's vehicle, which were parked near the building, and let the air out of the tires, methodically, every single one. Only after that did we start the pickup and slowly, without headlights, drive onto the territory and stop right by the pier. The first thing we did was take the boards out of the truck and lay them from the water's edge up to the truck bed. We were going to use them to push the Orca into the truck. I thought about what we were about to do, take someone else's property from a private guarded area, and by all formal rules, it was a crime. But the Coast Guard officer himself had told me that keeping the Orca here was legal. That meant that sometimes law and justice are not the same thing. I sat down at the edge of the pier and listened, and suddenly, from the darkness of the bay, came a sound, low and drawn out, almost like singing. The young orca was calling someone, and then from the sea, from the open water beyond the fence, came a response. The same low, drawn-out sound, but in a slightly different tone. The very orca that had led me here was out there in the darkness beyond the waves, and it had not left. I looked at Dan and saw that he understood too. The orcas were communicating through the concrete wall, and I suddenly realized that I had been hearing it for hours. I just hadn't noticed. The sound had not stopped since evening. While we were struggling with the loading, I accidentally caught the beam of my flashlight on the white patch behind the young orca's eye, and it felt like an electric shock went through me. The exact same patch was on the one that had chased me that morning. Not similar, identical, like close relatives. I remembered something I had once read. Orcas pass these markings to their young, just like people pass on facial features. It was the mother, and she had been waiting all night behind the concrete wall for her calf. I didn't have time to share my realization with the others. The young orca didn't give us a second to rest. It was panicking, thrashing around, not understanding what was happening or who these people were who were driving it toward the edge of the pier. One powerful blow of its tail hit Mark square in the chest and knocked him off his feet straight into the bay. He came up soaked from head to toe, spat out water, and silently climbed back onto the pier. This was not the time to argue. The three of us pushed together, trying to force it up the boards into the truck. It was heavy, much heavier than I expected, and slippery. And several times it felt like nothing would work. But then something changed. It seemed to stop resisting for a moment, letting us guide it. And we finally pushed it into the truck. Maybe it felt something. Maybe it was just tired of fighting. I don't know. Mark stayed in the back, pouring water over it from the canisters. I got behind the wheel, Dan sat next to me, and we quietly drove out through the same gate. Mark let out a quiet laugh in the back, imagining how the sleepy guard had just realized he was locked inside his own booth and had no idea what was happening around him. I looked at him in the rearview mirror and shook my head. It was too early to relax. A few seconds later, from behind us came a dull banging sound and a muffled shout. The guard had woken up and discovered that the door of his booth wouldn't open. Then the banging grew louder. We were already on the road. Dan couldn't hold it and started laughing first. I followed because we were both thinking the same thing. Even if that useless guard got out now, he wouldn't get far on flat tires. 15 minutes on the night road, and every minute felt heavy. Mark in the back kept pouring water non-stop and saying something quietly to the orca. I couldn't hear what exactly, but I looked in the mirror every half minute. It lay still, breathing, moving its fins. Dan stared at the navigation and stayed silent. I was thinking about only one thing, to make it in time. We reached a shoreline with a gentle slope toward the water, and then it turned out the pickup couldn't get all the way down. The shore dropped off in a steep edge right above the water, and the last few yards we had to carry the orca by hand. The three of us pulled it out of the truck, slipping several times. Dan fell to one knee and hissed in pain, but didn't stop. At some point, the orca itself felt the water nearby and literally slipped out of our hands, splashing loudly as it went under the surface. We stood on the rocks, wet and out of breath, and looked at the dark water. For a few seconds, nothing happened, only darkness and the sound of the waves. Then, in the headlights of the pickup, I saw two fins side by side, one large and one smaller, circling together near the shore, almost touching each other, and I heard those same sounds, low, flowing, completely different from the tense calls I had heard through the fence all night. This was something else. Mark stood nearby in silence, and I saw that he was just staring at the water without moving. I looked at the calf's cut fin. The wound was small. It would heal, I was sure of it. Then the mother accelerated and leaped completely out of the water, huge, black and white in spray and moonlight, and disappeared back into the darkness. The calf dove after her. Within a minute, their fins were gone. They were swimming away to a place where there are no fences or trucks with logos, where no one puts a price on a living being. Dan said something quietly under his breath. I didn't catch it. We stood there on the shore for a while longer, just looking at the water, simply standing, because no one wanted to be the first to leave. In our country, there is still no law that forbids capturing orcas and selling them into tiny prisons made of concrete and chlorine, where they spend the rest of their lives swimming in circles in front of an indifferent crowd. But Dan already had the material, footage of the injured orca, recordings of Castro's conversations, and proof that some animals here never even made it out alive. And my friend knew what to do with it. We were going to make so much noise in the media that this law would finally be passed. That day, a mother orca was begging us to save her calf. We simply could not walk away.